No one dared speak up to the millionaire until the daughter of the black cleaning woman handed him a lollipop. Get this child out of here right now! Bradley Torres's voice thundered through the marble hallway of the penthouse, making Carmen tremble as she clutched the hand of her 5-year-old daughter. This is no place for people like you to drag children around. The manager of Manhattan's most exclusive high-rise turned red with fury, jabbing his finger accusingly at little Jade. The girl, clutching a rainbow-colored lollipop, stared wide-eyed at the scene. It was only her second day following her mother to work, ever since the daycare had shut down, because Carmen could no longer afford the fees. Carmen Rodriguez, 28, had never imagined that cleaning a billionaire's penthouse would turn into a daily lesson in humiliation. The pay was double what she'd get anywhere else, but the emotional toll was crushing. Mr. Torres, please, Carmen whispered, keeping her voice low so as not to disturb the penthouse owner working in his study. She'll stay quiet. She won't bother anyone. Her school is closed and I had nowhere else to take her. I don't care, Bradley spat, each word dripping with contempt. A kid from the slums has no place in a $15 million penthouse. Mr. Pierce pays for professional service, not a daycare. Jade hugged the lollipop to her chest, her wide eyes absorbing every cruel word. Even at 5, she understood perfectly when someone was being cruel to her mother. And then a soft creak of a door opening at the far end of the hallway. Thomas Pierce, the most feared man on Wall Street, stepped out, his face unreadable. At 42, his mere presence made CEOs tremble. His empire of $8 billion was built on a reputation for ruthless precision. Bradley hadn't noticed him yet and went on flaunting his authority. If this happens again, you're fired. Got it. And don't bother with tears or drama. People like you are a dime a dozen. People like us are the ones who... This time, Carmen's voice broke sharper than she expected. Would you care to explain exactly what you mean by people like us? Bradley sneered, unaware he was being watched. You know exactly what I mean. You should be grateful for this job instead of acting entitled. The heavy silence cracked under the sound of measured footsteps across the marble floor. Thomas Pierce was walking slowly toward them, his cold blue eyes fixed on Bradley. Jade, who had been silent all along, suddenly let go of her mother's hand. She toddled forward to the tall man in the immaculate suit. With childlike innocence, she held up the rainbow-colored lollipop. Do you want my candy? Her sweet voice chimed. Mommy says when you share candy, people stop being mad. Time froze. Bradley's face drained of color as he finally noticed Thomas. Carmen held her breath. And something entirely unexpected shifted on the billionaire's ice-carved features. For one suspended moment, Thomas looked at the child offering him candy, then at the mother trying to protect her, and finally at Bradley now sweating bullets. Right there in the marble corridor where prejudice had just bared its ugliest face, something was about to change forever. And as everyone stood still, Thomas did what no one had ever seen him do. He slowly crouched to Jade's level, his movements deliberate, and gently accepted the lollipop. The gesture stood in absolute contrast to his ruthless reputation. Thank you, he said simply, his deep voice echoing through the frozen hallway. Bradley Torres felt his blood turn to ice. In 20 years of managing luxury properties, he had never seen the fearsome billionaire speak to a child, let alone accept something from one he considered unfit for this environment. Mr. Pierce, Bradley stammered, sweat beading on his forehead. I was just explaining building policy to the staff. We can't have situations like this repeating. Thomas rose to his full height, his glacial stare locking Bradley in place, forcing him back a step. Situations like this, Thomas repeated, his voice low and razor sharp. Would you care to clarify exactly what the problem here is? Every syllable landed like a verdict. Carmen gave a slight nod, torn between gratitude and caution, as she followed Bradley down the hall toward the office. Before stepping away, Thomas glanced back once more. Carmen was bent over speaking softly to Jade, her gentle hands smoothing the child's curls. The image struck a part of Thomas's soul he thought had long since withered away. What Bradley Torres didn't know was that this private conversation was only the beginning of a chain of revelations. Truths that would not only alter Bradley's future, but also expose an entire web of systemic discrimination spreading quietly like a tumor through Manhattan's most luxurious tower. The office door clicked shut behind Thomas Pierce, leaving a silence so heavy it seemed almost tangible. Bradley tried to maintain his usual calm demeanor, but the beads of sweat forming on his forehead betrayed the growing unease inside him. Sit, Thomas said evenly, striding toward the wide glass window that overlooked the Manhattan skyline. Outside, millions of lives intersected, each person waging battles of their own. Obediently, Bradley lowered himself into an Italian leather chair, eyes fixed on the broad back of his employer. 2 decades of managing high-end properties had taught him how to read the wealthy. Yet Thomas Pierce had always remained an enigma. And today, something in the atmosphere felt distinctly different. Tell me about the hiring process, Thomas said, his voice still calm, his gaze on the city below. Specifically, the criteria you use to decide who is qualified to work here. It sounded like a simple question, but Bradley sensed a trap in every syllable. Well, Mr. Pierce, Bradley began, we always prioritize candidates with strong references, proven experience, and of course the ability to meet the standard of excellence our residents expect. Standard of excellence, Thomas repeated slowly. Interesting. And how exactly do you define that? Bradley swallowed hard. Personal demeanor, punctuality, discretion, the ability to maintain confidentiality for the residents. Carmen possesses all those qualities, Thomas cut, in finally turning to face him. So where exactly is the issue? That was when Bradley made his second fatal mistake. Mistaking Thomas's composure for tacit agreement, he leaned forward, lowering his voice as though confiding a secret. To be blunt, Mr. Pierce, people like her, well, they always bring trouble. Today it's a child, tomorrow some unemployed boyfriend, next relatives showing up asking for handouts. It's always the same with those people. The silence that followed was suffocating. Thomas let the words linger in the air, echoing against the walls. When he finally spoke, his tone was so cold it made Bradley realize he had just crossed a line he could never retreat from. Those people, Thomas repeated. Go on. But before Bradley could continue, Thomas's phone rang. He glanced at the caller ID, Marcus Chun, his chief aide and trusted confidant for over a decade, a man who had proven loyalty and discretion time and again. Excuse me, Thomas said, answering. Marcus, yes, I'm in a meeting, but go ahead. Marcus's voice came clear and professional. Mr. Pierce, I've completed the analysis you requested on employee evaluations over the past 5 years. The results are remarkable. Thomas had ordered this review a week earlier after noticing irregularities in Bradley's reports. At first, it was a routine check. Now it was becoming a key piece of the puzzle. Send everything to my private email, Thomas instructed, and Marcus initiate a full audit of both hiring and termination practices, quietly but thoroughly. Bradley's unease deepened. He didn't understand the full scope of what was unfolding, but he knew one thing for certain: nothing good awaited him. When Thomas ended the call, his eyes locked onto Bradley. Now where were we? Ah, yes, you were explaining about those people. Meanwhile, outside in the building's library, Carmen was helping Jade choose children's books from the polished mahogany shelves. The little girl's eyes sparkled at the colorful illustrations, but Carmen found it impossible to focus. Her mind was fixed on the meeting taking place upstairs, a meeting that could decide not just her career but the financial safety of her daughter's future. Mommy, do you think the tall man is nice? Jade asked, holding up a book about forest animals. Why do you ask, sweetheart? Because he took my lollipop, Jade said with childlike logic. Bad people don't like sweet things. Her innocence almost made Carmen laugh despite the tension coiling inside her. If only the adult world could be as simple as a 5-year-old's reasoning. Back in the office, Bradley was starting to realize how badly he had miscalculated. Thomas Pierce wasn't just a billionaire too preoccupied to care about the details of operations. He was a master strategist, a man who had built an $8 billion empire by detecting patterns others overlooked. You know, Bradley, Thomas said, lowering himself behind his desk. I've always admired your efficiency in running this building. But lately, I've begun to question certain aspects of your methods. Bradley forced his voice to remain steady. Mr. Pierce, if there are specific concerns, Thomas cut him off, snapping open his laptop. Oh, there is. For example, in the past 5 years, you've either fired or reassigned 17 employees. Interestingly, 14 of them were Black or Latino. The reasons listed, all kinds, not a cultural fit. Communication issues. Bradley's blood seemed to freeze. He had never considered that anyone might compile all the data, let alone spot the pattern. That's just a coincidence, Mr. Pierce. I only hire based on merit. I'm sure you do, Thomas replied, his tone thick with icy sarcasm. And I'm also sure it's a coincidence that the white employees you hire routinely get raises and promotions, while the others keep facing mysterious performance issues. And meanwhile, 3 floors down in his private office, Marcus Chun was assembling information, the kind that would expose an entire network of discrimination far bigger than anyone had imagined. The data showed a glaring pattern. Bradley Torres wasn't just a biased manager. He was the architect of a system that quietly but illegally sustained a lack of racial diversity in the building through calculated manipulation. Marcus, who had grown up in an immigrant Korean family, recognized the tricks instantly. He had endured similar discrimination early in his own career before Thomas discovered him and saw his true potential. Back in the office, Thomas studied Bradley with the same cold precision he used when weighing a corporate takeover. You know what fascinates me the most? That you truly believed no one would notice. That you could build an entire system of discrimination right under my nose without consequences. Bradley finally grasped the gravity of the moment. He wasn't just dealing with an angry boss over a minor incident. He was being confronted by a man who had uncovered years of unlawful behavior and was preparing to deliver a devastating reckoning. Mr. Pierce, I can explain. Oh, you will explain, Thomas said, snapping the laptop shut with deliberate finality. To attorneys, to investigators, and especially to every single person you've harmed with your systematic bias. As the net drew tighter around Bradley Torres in the library, Carmen was reading Jade a story about a little butterfly that transformed an entire garden. Inside the office, no one realized that at that very moment, an even greater transformation was being set in motion just a few rooms away. And Thomas Pierce, the man everyone thought was cold untouchable, was about to prove that some injustices ignite a fury so precise, so calculated, it could move mountains. What Bradley didn't know was that this conversation was only the opening gambit in a strategy that would expose not only his own actions, but a sprawling network of discrimination embedded deep within Manhattan's corridors of power. The lingering question wasn't whether justice would come, but how sweeping, how destructive that justice would be when it finally struck. Marcus Chun stepped into the office carrying 3 thick binders and a tablet. His serious expression contrasted with the restrained satisfaction in his eyes. Mr. Pierce, the audit is complete. The results are absolutely damning. Bradley's last sliver of hope evaporated as Marcus opened the first binder, revealing hundreds of pages of meticulously arranged data. Color-coded charts highlighted undeniable patterns that no coincidence could explain. In the past 5 years, Marcus began this time addressing Bradley directly. You terminated 17 employees for so-called cultural misfit. 14 of them were Black or Latino. Meanwhile, you hired 23 white employees for equivalent roles, despite minority candidates often having stronger qualifications. Thomas's gaze bore into Bradley the same ruthless look he had used to dismantle rivals in the boardroom. Go on, Marcus. Marcus flipped to the next page. The pattern doesn't stop at hiring. Over 3 years, white employees received an average raise of 32%. Black and Latino employees, 7% with vague justifications like lack of professional growth. Bradley gambled on a desperate defense. Those numbers are out of context. You can't prove intent to discriminate. Marcus allowed himself the faintest smile as he tapped his tablet. Actually, we can. The screen lit up with a messaging app. Do you remember these conversations with other property managers in the district? Bradley's face went pale as his own words appeared. Marcus read them aloud. Message from Bradley Torres to Robert Manning, September 23rd. Got rid of another one. Used the poor communication excuse again. These people never understand they don't belong in places like this. That's taken out of context, Bradley shouted, his voice cracking with panic. Marcus pressed on, merciless. Message November 15th. The new policy is simple. Find any reason not to renew contracts. We have to maintain standards. Residents don't pay top dollar to put up with certain presences. Thomas rose slowly, walking toward the window. When he finally spoke, his voice was so cold it sent a chill down Bradley's spine. 23 years building this tower into a symbol of excellence, and you turned it into a monument to prejudice. And more than that, Marcus cut in, opening the second folder. We've gathered testimony from 11 former employees. Every single one describes the same pattern: systematic humiliation, sabotage of their work, creating impossible conditions just to justify firing them. Bradley knew there was no escape. Mr. Pierce, we can settle this internally. There's no need to involve who? Thomas interrupted with an icy smile. The attorney's combing through every contract you ever signed, the housing authority, who'll be receiving the full report tomorrow morning, or perhaps the 23 media outlets scheduled to receive detailed evidence of discrimination inside Manhattan's most expensive residential tower. Reality crashed down on Bradley like an avalanche. 20 years of career, his reputation in luxury real estate, all his connections being dismantled piece by piece. Marcus opened the third folder. And then there are the financial irregularities. Fees imposed only on minority employees, fabricated administrative charges, wage deductions totaling more than $80,000 over the past 3 years. That's theft, Thomas said flatly. On top of discrimination, you're nothing but a common criminal. Bradley tried to stand, but his legs failed him. You can't destroy me like this. I have a family, a mortgage. Thomas's voice cut through like ice. So does Carmen. So do all the employees whose lives you wrecked because you decided they didn't deserve to work in the building you managed. Marcus closed his tablet. The police will be here in 40 minutes to escort you out. Your access has already been revoked. Your personal belongings will be shipped to your residence. Thomas added, his tone sharp as steel. But before that, you'll do something you should have done years ago. He lifted the intercom phone. Carmen, can you bring Jade up to my office? There's something important I want you to hear. As they waited, Bradley tried one last plea. Mr. Pierce, if this goes public, the building's reputation will take a hit. Think of the property values. Thomas laughed, the sound devoid of warmth making Bradley shrink. You think I care more about real estate values than doing what's right? When this story breaks, and it will tonight, this building will be known as the place where discrimination was exposed and erased, where justice prevailed. The door opened. Carmen stepped in cautiously, holding Jade's hand. The little girl still clutched her half-finished lollipop, smiling when she saw Thomas. Carmen, Thomas said gently, I want you to hear this directly from Mr. Torres. Then his gaze turned sharp toward Bradley. Tell her. Tell her about your so-called standards. Tell her she and people like her never deserve to work here. Bradley stared at the floor, unable to lift his head. Lost your voice, Thomas mocked. Then I'll say it for you. He turned back to Carmen. For the past 5 years, this man built a system designed to keep people like you out. He fired employees for being Black or Latino. He stole wages. He created a hostile environment to drive them away. Carmen listened silently, her eyes brimming with tears. But they weren't tears of sorrow, they were proof. Proof that all the dismissive looks, the condescending remarks, the moments she felt set apart finally had a name. Thomas's voice steadied with conviction. But today it ends. Mr. Torres has been terminated. He's facing criminal charges. He paused, then softened. And you, Carmen, if you're willing, I want to promote you to assistant manager of this building, with a salary that reflects the true value of your work. Jade, who had followed the conversation with the limited understanding of a 5-year-old, stepped toward Bradley. Why were you mean to my mom? She asked, her innocent voice, carrying a weight no adult accusation ever could. For the first time, Bradley looked up into Jade's clear eyes, the same eyes that once offered him a lollipop without the slightest trace of prejudice. And in that moment, faced with a child's simple question, the ugliness of his actions became undeniable. Far below, the sound of police sirens rose from the street, 47 stories down. Thomas glanced out the window and allowed himself a smile. Not the cold, bitter smile from earlier, but one of genuine satisfaction. You know something, Carmen, he said, watching security escort Bradley away. There's a kind of poetry in this. It all began with Jade offering a sweet to a stranger, and ends with stripping away the bitterness that poisoned this place. Carmen held Jade tightly, finally understanding that the lollipop wasn't just a childish gesture. It had been the catalyst that completely changed their lives. But as Bradley Torres faced the most dramatic downfall of his life, one question still lingered. How does an entire community heal from years of systemic discrimination? And could that one small act of kindness ripple into even greater change? 6 months later. Carmen Rodriguez walked through the luxurious penthouse corridors with a poise that was worlds away from who she once was. As the new assistant manager, she had implemented progressive hiring policies, transforming the building into a model of diversity and excellence in Manhattan. Mom Look Jade ran across the main lobby, now blooming with vibrant plants she had suggested. The garden's growing. Now, 6 years old and enrolled in a prestigious private school, Jade still carried the same sweetness that had won Thomas over the very first day they met. Meanwhile, Bradley Torres lived in a starkly different reality. Fired for cause, sued for discrimination and embezzlement, he lost his home in Long Island. Not a single luxury real estate firm would touch his resume. His disgrace spread quickly through the industry. Hey, check this out, Marcus Chun said, handing Thomas a copy of the New York Times. The article praised the building as a model of social transformation. 17 candidates have applied to transfer here since the changes Marcus added. Thomas smiled, watching Carmen as she guided new staff with a rare mix of firmness and compassion, the very qualities Bradley had always lacked. It's funny, he said softly. The moment we stop making excuses for our own mediocrity, we realize talent never had a color. The irony was undeniable. Bradley, who had once prided himself on upholding standards of excellence, had been replaced by the very person who truly embodied them. Under Carmen's leadership, resident satisfaction had soared to record highs. Uncle Thomas Jade ran up and hugged him still, using the nickname she had invented. Today, I brought green apple lollipops. Do you want one always? He replied, accepting it with a genuine smile, the same smile that had first appeared on that fateful day. Bradley had tried to destroy Carmen with his prejudice. In the end, he had destroyed himself. Carmen had come to understand that true revenge wasn't about striking back, it was about achieving the kind of success your enemies could never imagine. And as Jade handed out lollipops in the hallway, spreading sweetness where bitterness had once ruled, a simple truth became clear. Sometimes, to change the world, all it takes is a child brave enough to offer a stranger a lollipop. If this story of transformation and justice touched your heart, subscribe for more stories proving that genuine kindness will always outshine prejudice disguised as tradition.